Hey y'all, my name's Joey and welcome back to Joey's Booked. Today we are going to be talking about some of my most anticipated reads in the upcoming months. Behind me here I have a big shelf of books that I usually go to first whenever I am trying to decide what my next read's going to be, unless it's over a specific vlog or something like that. And usually I have these stacks kind of sorted out into different genres or maybe just the overall vibe of what I'm kind of looking to read. And usually I'll pick up a book, kind of glance it over, maybe read the first couple pages, something like that. Now, all of these are books that I have not read yet, so even though I may have a general idea of what the synopsis is, I may not fully remember. But we are going to kind of go through and look at these different stacks. Our first stack of books are either horror or they have kind of a dark vibe to them. I believe just about every book in the stack is considered to be horror or horror adjacent. And the first book that we have in this stack would be Paradise Rot by Jenny Haval. The reviews that I've heard over Paradise Rot really describe it as really just very gross, disgusting. I mean, even in the title we have the word rot, and I believe there's a lot with like rotten food and things like that. I've heard that there is some LGBTQ+ representation in this as well, and I've heard very mixed reviews. I know this is originally translated from Norwegian, and I'm really curious as I've been getting into more translated works and similar things. Then the next book in this stack is a horror classic that I've been putting off for a minute, and that's going to be The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. I have been really wanting to know more about this story for a while. I know that it is very gothic-esque and character-driven, based around a lot of characters that are in a haunted-type house. This has been very popular, especially after probably a handful of years now when there was The Haunting of Hill House Netflix TV adaptation. And since then, I've kind of had it on my radar, even though I've not wanted to watch that adaptation until I've read the source material, because I've heard that they are very different, and I want to have a comparison, because I usually like to read the book before I watch the film or the TV show. I'm always very wary with classics, and I tend to put them off. I've had this one on my anticipated reads for probably about 6 months or more, and it's one that I really want to get to soon. Another really popular book that I've heard great reviews for, and I still haven't dug into this author's work, would be Brother by Anya Alborn. I've heard amazing things about this, and I've heard kind of some spoilery kind of reviews on this. I don't know how much I full out remember, but from looking on the back of the synopsis, what I understand is this is kind of about a boy who is in a family of serial killers and is expected kind of to follow that same kind of path, but then he meets a girl and it's kind of, he wants to either protect her or he falls in love with her or something like that, and then it just kind of takes off from there. I've heard that this has some crazy fast-paced things happening in it, and I've heard that the ending is also pretty great. So I'm really hoping to finally pick up and see if Anya Alborn is really worth all the hype. And then we have an ARC copy that I was thankfully sent from Torn Nightfire. If you're not familiar with an ARC copy, it's an advanced reader copy. And that would be a copy of A Mask of Flies by Matthew Lyons. Now, I've seen a few reviews over this as they've started to pop up, and I've heard pretty good reviews. So what this is about is about Anne, and Anne has been involved with heists. She's kind of been a bank robber. She's kind of been a career criminal. She has fled home to where her mother has died. But when she goes back, she has also taken with her a detective that she has taken hostage. And then things kind of spiral from there. I do believe this is supposed to be more on the horror side than thriller, with this being a new release that I don't think releases until I believe August. I don't know a whole lot about what's going on, but I'm really curious to find out. Then we have The Ritual by Adam Neville. Now, I have seen the movie adaptation of this book before. It wasn't originally something I thought that I would be interested in until we watched the movie adaptation with the 24-hour horror-thon with Ashley's Little Library a few readathons ago now, I believe. And this is folk horror that follows a group of male friends that are kind of wandering off. I believe it was for a celebration for someone who had passed away, and they are out in the wilderness, and then creepy things start to happen, and they start finding weird things in the woods, something's possibly following them, and it kind of not only shows their bond, but it also looks at their relationships, things like that, and it really explores all of those aspects while still having that folky kind of monster vibe to it. I did really enjoy the adaptation, and I've enjoyed other reads by Adam Neville in the past, and I'm really excited to see, because I've heard the book is way better than the adaptation. Our next book is going to be my next Stephen King read in publication order. At the time of filming this, I am just finishing up Christine, which will hopefully have a vlog coming up very soon if it hasn't already released yet. So our next Stephen King read will be Cycle of the Werewolf, and I am personally really excited for this one because it's just a short novella. This is one of King's books that I do not have in the original format, but nevertheless, I am just really excited to dive into this, as I always am for a King read, but especially when it's something short, because while I love King's work, they always take me a really long time to get through. And according to the back of this, I have not actually read the synopsis of this before, it says, "The first screams came in January from the snowbound railway man who felt the inhuman fangs ripping at his throat. The shrieks of ecstatic agony from the woman attacked in her cozy bedroom were heard from the following month. As the years progressed and seasons changed, scenes of unimaginable horror unfolded into the isolating main town of Talker's Mills." And I'm going to kind of leave it there, but it sounds like we are going to really be following just a town that has had the same problem and werewolves and things coming in, which is really interesting to see kind of King take on that werewolf take, because I have not read something quite like that from him yet. I've seen vampires and ghosts and other things like that, but werewolves are not something that have been very King-esque in the experiences I've had with his books. Then from another one of my favorite authors is The Pallbearers Club by Paul Tremblay. I do have hesitations going into this one, and it's another reason I've been putting off this specific one of Paul Tremblay's books. I have heard very, very mixed reviews, and a lot of people that love some of my favorites of his do not quite love this one because they don't claim that it is as much horror. Plus, this also has lots of annotations and underlines in the text, and I personally do not normally like reading books that have been annotated. I do not annotate my own books. I know for a lot of readers that's a big thing. Me, I just like the look of a nice, fresh, clean copy. But these annotations in the text are made by one of our characters. So in this, we are following Art Barbara, and in this, he is kind of telling his side of a story from his childhood that him and one of his friends were involved with. But as you are going back and getting these annotations, you are also going back and getting her replies and stuff as she is reading through it herself, and as she is asking questions, are kind of saying that things that happened in this were not actually accurate. And I don't know, I think this is such a neat idea, and I still am excited to read it because it is Paul Tremblay, but I'm not really sure the full out route that this takes, or if the annotations are going to become more of a hindrance than a help to the story. Then we have The Center, which is by Aisha Manazir Siddiqui. I believe I am pronouncing that correctly. We are following a character who basically has a friend who invites them to come to this center. And it is a very special invitation because she's noticed that her friend has suddenly learned and become really fluent in a language out of nowhere, and it's something that she kind of wants to get on. So she gets invited to this very secretive center. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be culty vibes or if there is some other dark, magical kind of undertaking going on. I'm not sure the full vibe of it, but I do know that you start getting to see into the interworkings of what is going on as she is going to hopefully become fluent in a language in a matter of days or a very short amount of time on her own. And I have heard amazing, amazing things. The most of the people that I have seen who have read this have given it around a 5-star, and I am really excited to get into it as well. Another book that I am really excited to jump into, hopefully soon, is going to be Mary by Cassidy. Earlier this year, I read Nestlings, and I believe I gave it either a 4 or 4.5 stars, and I really, really, really enjoyed it. But I'm really curious to Mary, because I have heard such amazing things about this, but there's also something strange to me about the fact that Nat Cassidy is a man writing about menopause. Or at least I believe that is exactly what he's supposed to be talking about in here. I know that there are supposed to be some really weird, kind of crazy scenes in here, that it is supposed to be just a really great take on this topic, which yet again is really strange coming from a male author. But I do know, especially from reading Nestlings, that Nat Cassidy often talks about things that are very relative to his own life, and I'm really curious to see where it goes from here. Then the final book in this stack is probably one that has been on the stack longer than any other book, and I have been meaning to get to this book for over a year now, and that's going to be Sign Here by Claudia Lux. This is supposed to be more of a comedic horror, which is something I have a very, very hit or miss relationship with, and I usually don't like it more often than times that I do. However, the premise of this just really, really intrigues me. However, the premise of this is super intriguing, it's super unique, and it's something that I want to give it a chance. And in this, we are following Piote, and Piote is, I believe, a lesser demon, and he is in hell, and it is kind of his job to collect souls for Satan. Piote is going up to this family and he's trying to basically collect souls, and then he kind of gets involved and we see where it goes from there. I don't have a clue exactly what type of route within kind of the comedic horror that this takes. I don't know if it's more about his relationships with the family and being mortal, or if it's going to take some kind of darker turn. But I do need to finally get to this book and get this off of my personal backlist of things I've been wanting to read. And now we are on to my second stack of anticipated books. So the second stack kind of is an amalgamation of different genres. We have a couple leftover ones that may have fit more on the horror or have more thriller vibes. We have some fantasy, and we have some things just kind of in between that kind of needed the space, and that middle stack really fit them in. So at the top of this stack, we have In the Miso Soup by Ryu Murakami. And this is going to be my first Ryu Murakami that I have read. This is the one that I have probably heard the most about. I have not heard the greatest things about some of this author's other work, but I have heard pretty good things about this one. I know it's supposed to be a weird, wild ride. It involves serial killers to some degree, and just kind of some strange things happening within what is going on with that serial killer. I know that this was originally released in Japan. It has been translated from Japanese. And in the past, I have often really enjoyed books that are translated from Japanese, and I'm just very curious to see how this one goes and just how weird it gets. And then we have another classic that is one that I missed out on in school, even though a lot of people were reading, and I've read a lot of stuff that it has influenced, and I really want to get back and see exactly what it's about. And that's going to be Lord of the Flies by William Golding. And I don't know what it is about this edition, but with the black on the white and just all the spirals and the drips and things like that, I think this is just a stunning edition. But Lord of the Flies is one of those stories about just kids in survival, and just the crazy lengths that they will go to in a society where there is no one else to really do anything about. And I've seen this trope kind of done again and again, but I know this is, from my understanding at least, is one of the original source materials for a lot of those things, similar to books like Boys in the Valley by Philip Facassi, which has been a big one recently that I've read in the last couple of months. So I'm really excited to see what has been pulled from this and just what kind of lengths exactly this goes to. Getting more into fantasy, another one that's been on the CBR for a little bit that I am really excited to jump into is going to be Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. From what I understand, this is part of a duology, and I believe they have also had some short stories released in the past year or so following this duology, and I know that it is very rich in Chinese culture, which is something that I'm very intrigued by, especially in the fantasy setting. This is just another one fantasy sometimes I get scared of, both because of the length, and especially when I don't know how high the fantasy is going to be. I have yet to really read a lot of high fantasy, but I have read some lighter, middle-of-the-ground ones that I've really enjoyed, and a lot of them that I have enjoyed have had a lot of this cultural relevance to them. I don't know much about it outside of that, but it says, growing up on the moon, Xinyin is accustomed to solitude, unaware that she is being hidden from the feared celestial emperor who exiled her mother for stealing his elixir of immortality. But when Xinyin magic flares and her existence is discovered, she is forced to flee her home, leaving her mother behind. And then it just kind of goes through there, and there's some kind of journey, I believe. I will say I'm not 100% sure I am pronouncing these names correctly, as my pronunciation is not always the best when they are names from cultures that I haven't had a lot of exposure to. But I am also just very excited to jump into this and see what the Celestial Kingdom duology is all about. Then we have Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. I was fortunate enough, and I love the sprayed edges on this edition. I normally don't go for super collector's editions unless that just happens to be what they have, but there was something about the trees and just how thin the lines were on this one that I just thought was absolutely beautiful. So whenever I decided to pick up one of his other books, I grabbed this as well. And this is, I'm not sure if this is considered fantasy or just magical realism, but I do know that this is involved heavily around grief, and that this isn't as lighthearted as TJ Klune's other book that I've read, which is The House in the Cerulean Sea. But I do know that we are following Wallace, and the Reaper is coming to collect him, and he starts to realize that he might be dead. And then there is also the owner of a tea shop who kind of helps him cross over. And it just kind of goes through this experience of Wallace just being willing to cross over into the afterlife, but also just a lot of the grief and feelings and things like that that come along with this journey. I normally really love grief stories, especially in horror. I have not read something in more of this lane with grief, but I am really curious to see if this is something I can enjoy as much as other similar things in the more cozy-ish kind of drama, even though this will have heavier topics. Another book from an all-time favorite author of mine is going to be Life Ceremony by Sayaka Murata, and this is another book I have been putting off reading for so long, not because I'm worried I'm not going to like this one, but because this is the last book I have by this author, and I love her work so much, and I love the commentary. Earthlings is one of my all-time favorite books, and I also really enjoyed Convenience Store Woman. Now, Life Ceremony is more of a short story collection, which I'm very hit or miss with, but knowing it's from this author, I'm sure I'm going to enjoy it, and I know there's a lot of weird and kind of crazy topics that are touched on within it as well, and this is one I'm really hoping to get to very soon. Another shorter fantasy, magical realism type book that has been on my radar and on my anticipated shelf for also close to probably a year is going to be The Crane Husband by Kelly Barnhill. I've heard very mixed reviews, but the people who love this say that it has become maybe one of their all-time favorite books that they have read. And this basically follows this family, and then there's the symbolism of a crane coming in and the effect that it has on this family. And I believe it even talks about it maybe being married to the mother in the story. It is another very, very short novella, and I believe that we are also getting the perspective of the 15-year-old teenage child and how this whole situation of the mother bringing home this crane affects their childhood and their family dynamic and various other aspects. I've heard it's very deep. I've heard it can be very moving, and I'm really hoping this hits for me as well as it has some other people. Next up, we have another special edition that I picked up unintentionally. I just happened to be looking for the book, and they had special editions that day, and I believe that this is also a signed edition, and that is going to be The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Now, I have only read Galatea by Madeline Miller. Greek mythological retellings are not something I know if are really going to be in my wheelhouse, but I know that this is supposed to have some really great queer representation. I've heard a lot of people say that this book has just made them sob, and I am curious to see what it is really about. I know it's had a lot of critical acclaim, and in this we are following Achilles and I believe Patroclus, and we are just kind of following the story in a retelling of Achilles' story from, I believe, the Iliad was Achilles. Like I said, Greek mythology is not my strong suit, but I am very curious to see if this is a genre that is for me. I also own Circe by Madeline Miller. If I enjoy this, I'm hoping to get to it. I was originally going to try to read it first, but I kind of switched them out on the shelf after a while because I was more interested in the queer vibes I knew that were in this. Then we have a thriller that I just recently actually picked up, and when I redid the shelf, I added this to it because I know there is a movie adaptation, and that is Leave the World Behind by Ramon Alam. Another name I really hope I'm pronouncing correctly. But from what I understand, Leave the World Behind is a thriller that, or at least something, a suspense at least. So Leave the World Behind is basically about this couple, and they are going on vacation, and they're in the home that they're staying in Long Island, and they're just ready for kind of a more relaxed, just kind of stay in, kind of lock down, be away from people, and then all of a sudden the owners of this property show up and are like, oh, we need to be here, we need to stay here, and it just kind of goes from there. I'm not sure if this is supposed to be quite post-apocalyptic. I don't know if it's just thriller, if it's suspense, but I've heard very, very mixed reviews, both on this and on the adaptation. But because I've heard so much about it in the last year or so, or whenever that came out on Netflix, it made me really want to pick it up, and I found like a cheap $5 copy, and just was like, all right, let's grab it. And with it being so short, I figured, why not? And the last one in this stack is going to be another fantasy, but this is more of a historical fantasy, which is even further outside of my comfort zone. But that is going to be The Foxwife by Yingzi Chu. And all I really know about this one is I know it is historical, it is set in, I believe, 1908, and that it is another one that has some Chinese culture and stuff intertwined in. This was not something I would normally have picked up, but it did show up on Book of the Month, and there was another book I wanted at the time, but in order to do that, I had to pick one of the monthly picks or one of the suggested ones. So I went ahead and grabbed this, and the more that I think about it, I think this could be something I could really enjoy. But either way, I really need to read down some more of my Book of the Month picks before I pick up too many more, as they are slowly collecting more and more. So I'm really hopeful that both the historical nature of this and the fantasy and almost mythological side of this is something that I'll really enjoy. Our last stack of books is probably not just the tallest stack, probably the thickest stack. This is more of my general fiction, maybe some speculative or magical realism, um, and maybe a few things in between. But this has a lot of the bigger books I want to, so it doesn't have necessarily more books, but a lot of these books are a lot longer. And the first book we're going to be talking about in that stack is Otesha Mossfeg's My Year of Rest and Relaxation. And I know Otesha Mossfeg's name has been out there for a minute, especially lately with with the movie adaptation of her novel Eileen, which I also have a copy of. I've actually owned this one a little bit longer, and I know that we are just kind of following a character study in the day of a life of a woman who is very depressed, and we are just kind of seeing how she doesn't work, she doesn't really do anything, and it's just kind of studying different things in her life, and how her taking a year off to do absolutely nothing has really just affected her. I did get this as a birthday gift almost a year ago now, so we are going to put that on our stack of anticipated books because I still haven't picked it up, and hopefully that will help me get to it sooner. The chunkiest book on this list, and the one that I have also put off for over a year now, and I said I was going to read it this summer, and I still haven't read it because I read some other chunky books instead, and was like, oh no, now you can't read that, is going to have to be A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. This is supposed to be one of the most depressing books ever written. A lot of people have a lot of comments on that it shouldn't have been written, and it's just about people going through horrible things for the sake of going through horrible things. But because I do love sad lit and depressing lit and things like that, I think it's something I could really enjoy. It also gets a lot of high praise because it is one of the most depressing things ever written, according to a lot of reviewers. So one day I'm going to finally pick it up, but I know if I don't have it sitting on this anticipated stack staring at me, it's going to take me a lot longer to get to. And I'm really hoping that once I finally pick this up, it's going to be a 5-star book. This is a 5-star prediction for me. Next, we have another kind of dystopian speculative type of book, and that is going to be Oryx and Crate by Margaret Atwood. Lately, I've been in the mood to get into some more series because I don't often keep many series going, and when I do, I tend to binge through them as long as I have the books. And oftentimes, I will put off a series if I don't have the whole series. But then I won't buy the rest of the series because I don't want to buy the whole series if I don't like the first book. However, I, a long time ago, bought a ton of Margaret Atwood books. So all I know about this is it is in Margaret Atwood's kind of weird, speculative kind of style where she is making lots of social commentary, and that it is supposed to be very post-apocalyptic, and I'm not sure what all else happens from there. The only thing that I've read from Atwood in the past is The Handmaid's Tale and its sequel, The Testaments, the original being an amazing, amazing book. The Testaments very felt like it was written from the TV show. Either way, I need to get into more Atwood as I have like 6 or 7 of her books on my shelves, and having really enjoyed her writing in the past, hopefully I can knock a few out by getting into the series. Another speculative book on this would be Una Out of Order by Margarita Montemore. So Una Out of Order is following Una, and I believe it's on the eve of her 19th birthday on New Year's Eve. The bell chimes and she wakes up and she is shot into a completely different year of her life. She is not suddenly on the next year. It is like probably 20 more years into the future, and her life is just going on as it has ever been. And at every New Year's, she just jumps to another random year. So her life is not linear like everyone else's. I have heard this is a really fun read. I've heard there's some good commentary. I've seen a couple reviewers give this really, really high reviews. But I'm very interested in it because normally I'm not super into time travel or necessarily sci-fi type things. But This one seems more lighthearted and not as focused on specifically the science fiction type idea of time travel. I've had this on this shelf off and on for a couple of months, and I think it's time to finally just sit down and read it and see what it's all about. A more recent pickup that I picked up when I was in New York City, I believe I got Paradise Rot at the same time as I picked this up, and I believe I got them both at the Strand bookstore, is going to be another LGBTQ book, and a little bit of an older one. And that is going to be The Sluts by Dennis Cooper. I do not know really what to expect out of this one. I know that we are following some type of account of a male escort, and that there's a lot of commentary on LGBTQIA. I know I said this is an older release. I believe this was either in the late 90s or early 2000s when this... Oh yeah, this was published in 2004. This isn't as old as I thought it was. But as we are getting the story of this male escort, we are getting it all through mixed media. And I have been very intrigued by some mixed media that I've seen in the past. I've read several things that are more epistolary, and then I believe I've read one or two things that may have been more through emails. It's something I have to be really in the mood for, but with the more taboo topics within this book and even with the title, I am very curious to see just what kind of commentary this brings and if it holds up today. Another short story collection is going to be Salt Slow by Julia Armfield. Our Wives Under the Sea is probably one of my top 5 favorite books of all time. Those often fluctuate, but it always remains in the top 5. And this short story collection came out before that. I've heard that it is not near as strong, but with Julia Armfield also having Private Rights, I believe, is the name of her new book that is coming out later this year, I want to go ahead and read Salt Slow, get this one under my belt, and then that way I can just look forward to her new releases. One book that I am really hoping is going to be on this month's reads for June is going to be Bellies by Nicola Dinan. Not 100% sure how to say their last name, so I apologize if I'm butchering that one. And I believe that, if I remember correctly, I believe this may be by a trans author, but I do know for sure what we are following in this is we are following a gay couple that meets when they are younger, and they start dating and they fall in love, and then one day one of them decides to transition into being a woman. And it follows the effects that this takes on their relationship, and you just kind of follow it from there. I just randomly picked this up one day, having heard nothing about it. I still have barely heard anything about it since, but with it being Pride Month, I think it would be awesome to at least read a trans story, if not a story by who I believe is a trans author, and just get some more perspective on the trans experience. Our last 2 books are both 2 more books of the month picks that I am hoping to get through soon. And the first one of those is going to be Happiness Falls by Angie Kim. Happiness Falls is following a Korean American girl whose father disappears, but she also is not only trying to figure that out, there is also some strange things going on with her brother who is nonverbal. And this is supposed to have just a lot of good messaging in it. I've seen a lot of people give this 4 or 5 stars, and I've heard that it handles these more sensitive topics of both race and of having nonverbal representation very well. And I've heard the messaging in this is absolutely phenomenal. For a long time, I wasn't sure if this is one that I would actually end up enjoying, but the more and more I hear about it, the more that I think it's finally time to pick this up. And our final book is one that I am also really excited and has been making big waves on BookTube lately, and it's something I wouldn't normally pick up. And that is going to be The Husbands by Holly Gramazio. So, The Husbands, we are following a woman, and every time that her husband goes up into the attic, another husband comes out. But what's so weird about this is not only does another man come out of the attic, her entire life changes around that to reflect it. So she is getting all of these scenarios where she has been married to different men. And this is still, yet again, on that speculative side. There, and I'm not sure if it's supposed to be just like parallel universe, or if there's some other type of magic or something going on, or if it's something that's even going to be explained. Because this just doesn't give me the feel. I feel like it's going to be a little more ambiguous on that sense. But I am really curious to see this journey that this character goes on, and it just sounds very weird, and that's why I think it could still be up my alley. And with that, that is all of my anticipated reads for the next upcoming couple of months. These will not be everything necessarily that I read. There may be things that show up in content, there may be things that don't, or there may be things that maybe get moved around. But as of right now, these are the things that I'm very excited to hopefully get to. Please make sure you like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. And if there are any of these that you have either read or that you are hoping to get to here soon, make sure to leave that in a comment down below. Or if you don't have anything else, you can leave an emoji of the stack of books and let me know that you've seen this. Thank you again for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Bye.